Good morning, everyone. We're continuing here in the CHOFETZ CHAIM in the laws of Lashon Hara, and he raises a very important point today. Now, we're speaking about the heter, the leniency of apei tlasa, which seems to suggest that in certain situations, even though we've seen it's very hard to localize exactly what that situation is, if Ruvain would be telling over the information about Shimon in front of three people, then perhaps one of those three people, let's call him Levi, would be allowed to go and transfer that information that he has to another person. Let's just say that all the facts would line up properly and you'd be able to. But the CHOFETZ CHAIM clarifies that everything we've discussed up until this point of if there really is such a heter of apei tlasa, of saying in front of three people, hu mitzad iser ha'amira bi'atzmei. This is all according to the words of Lashon Hara that those three people themselves heard related by Reuven. Avachas v'shalom, but God forbid, lahaisiv afilu teva achas, if Levi, who's one of the three people that heard the words of Lashon Hara from Reuven about Shimon, would go now and tell over these words and add even teva achas, one extra word, to the reports that Reuven made about Shimon, or in order to enhance these words of Lashon Hara in front of the person who's listening to him now. Loimar, he says, Shimon, this story that I heard about Shimon, Yof and Ishmael, it's very fitting because he's that kind of a person. He would do that. The or similar, where Levi, who's now telling over what he heard from Reuven, is kind of giving his approval. He's demonstrating that he approves of the reports of Lashon Hara that he heard. Zevadai aser b'chol gavnei. This is certainly aser in all circumstances. You are not allowed to add, to enhance, to embellish any of the words that you heard originally. Because by doing this, Levi, who is the one who's going and saying the words of Lashon Hara now, which he thought that he had a permission to do because of apei tlasa, so he now is mekalkel, he's harming and damaging Shimon with his words. More than the report that had just been told over from Reuven to Levi about Shimon. Al pi hasvar de apei tlasa, meaning if it would have just been that Levi is allowed to go and tell over the words because there's three people that are listening at the same time, and he says over word for word basically what Reuven said originally. Okay, so he spread the Lashon Hara, but perhaps he's allowed to do such a thing. Mashenken, on the other hand, if he adds anything or embellishes anything, he thinks that he's acting with the permission of the apei tlasa, and it's not true. He's not allowed to, and he's mekalkel. He's degrading Shimon even more over here. Furthermore, says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, and then it's also clear that Levi must have believed the words of Lashon Hara that Reuven was saying in truth, because he shows that he's repeating it and he's saying, I believe such a thing, and that's something that Shimon would have done. And that, and as we know, in the laws of Lashon Hara, if you hear Lashon Hara, you're not allowed to be makabel, to accept the Lashon Hara as being true. You could be choishish, you could be suspect to it that perhaps it's true, but you're not allowed to be makabel, you're not allowed to accept it as being true. And if you do, we'll explain that later on in the 7th chapter, Ayin Sham, you'll see over there that it's if a person's makabel, they accept the Lashon Hara, that itself is the sin of Lashon Hara. And here you have now that Levi is claiming that he accepted the words of Lashon Hara, and therefore he has now transgressed that as well. Now, just to bring down over here in the notes, this halach is very relevant when a person's writing a newspaper article about something that is already public knowledge. So you have, for example, you're writing newspaper articles, you have all these Jewish news outlets online that are posting stories about religious people, about Jewish people, and it's already public knowledge by the time that it gets out there. Says the CHOFETZ CHAIM over here that even if you're permitted to repeat such information, you have to be very careful not to embellish the story in any way that will make it look worse than it is, so that it will encourage people to accept those words as being true. And this is a very difficult, a very fine line that those in the media are walking at all times to make sure that they don't say, when the story says, must read, shocking news, that's already embellishing and adding. You're there just to report the information that took place, and you leave it up to the listener or to the viewer or the reader of that article to decide, is it valid, is it not valid, should I be suspect, should I not? You have to leave it up to the others. You cannot enforce your belief of it, otherwise you're transgressing laws of Lashon Hara. Have a wonderful day.